As President Trump swirls in crisis, from his Syria decision, which we discussed, to his likely pending impeachment, and we're going to have more on that next segment, it is worth noting that Trump is clearly a disruptor, disrupting our nation's political norms and dividing this country clearly. But it's also worth remembering that past is prologue, that as a nation, we have actually been through this before. And reminding you of that story may help explain Trump's current hold on our politics and why, hopefully, at least from my perspective, it may not last that much longer. And for that lesson about the late Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy, let's bring in senior political correspondent Andrew Whitman. You were saying to me in the break, so many parallels.
There are, and McCarthy is such a singular figure in American politics, Rich. There just aren't a lot of American political figures at all who have had entire eras named after them, even fewer who were never president. But Joe McCarthy is one of them. That era, McCarthyism, considered one of the darkest chapters of 20th century American politics. McCarthy was a relatively obscure Republican freshman in the Senate after his election in 1946. But that all changed in a flash in 1950. With what became known as McCarthy's enemies within speech, he claimed, quote, the State Department is infested with communists. He said he had in his hand a list of 205 names that were made known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party and who nevertheless, he said, are still working and shaping policy in the State Department. His list was never made public. No evidence was ever produced to back up his claim. But McCarthy's words ushered in the Red Scare. People's lives were upended just under suspicion of being a communist. Scores of Hollywood writers and actors were blacklisted, banished from finding work. McCarthy kept on with screeds of people infiltrating the government, if this sounds familiar, and attacks on the press.
Today, the most dangerous enemy agent is not so much concerned with the secret information about weapons as he is with infiltrating the necessary departments of the government and shaping and controlling the actions of our nation so that the enemy is progressively winning without even firing a single shot.
I am compelled by the facts to say to you that Mr. Edward R. Murrow, as far back as 20 years ago, was engaged in propaganda for communist causes.
Murrow's name will come up again in just a moment. McCarthy's stranglehold on American politics lasted a little more than 4 years. In March of 1944, CBS anchor Edward R. Murrow dedicated an entire episode of his program, See It Now, to McCarthy. And he countered McCarthy's vitriol like this.
He proved again that anyone who exposes him, anyone who does not share his hysterical disregard for decency and human dignity and the rights guaranteed by the Constitution, must be either a communist or a fellow traveler. I fully expected this treatment. The senator added this reporter's name to a long list of individuals and institutions he has accused of serving the communist cause. His proposition is very simple. Anyone who criticizes or opposes McCarthy's methods must be a communist. And if that be true, there are an awful lot of communists in this country.
McCarthy's role in history was sealed 1 month later when he expanded his claim to say that communists had infiltrated the Army, and again he did so without proof. In a televised hearing, the counsel for the Army, Joseph Welch, expressed what came to be the lasting national memory of Joe McCarthy.
Now, I just give this man's record, and I want to say, Mr. Welch, that it has been labeled long before he became a member, as early as 1944.
Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
At long last, have you no sense of decency? There are a lot of reasons for retelling McCarthy's story right now during this particular moment. One is timing. McCarthy's spotlight lasted 4 years and 4 months, as I said before. Donald Trump descended the escalator at Trump Tower to launch his campaign on June 16, 2015. That means that right now, today, we are 1 week shy of 4 years and 4 months from this happening. Very similar time frames. Then there's the language both men used. McCarthy's enemies within speech, you read some of that. Trump now, the day he declared.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
There are additional parallels as well. One of them is a lawyer named Roy Cohn, who has been charitably described in a documentary as vile, ugly, corrupt, indecent, a hypocrite, a puppeteer, a liar, and a demagogue. Cohn was at McCarthy's side during the 1950s. He later moved to Donald Trump's side in the 1970s and 80s. Trump today has been quoted as asking, "Where's my Roy Cohn?" while complaining about his attorney general. Many say Trump learned his always attack approach from Cohn. There's one more critical parallel between McCarthy and Trump. Neither happened in a vacuum. Their contemporaries, to a large degree, allowed them to seize their respective moments in the spotlight. One of those in the McCarthy era was Robert Taft, Republican senator from Ohio. He was the Republican Senate leader and the son of a former president. He allowed McCarthy to continue his attacks unchecked because Taft correctly believed McCarthy would help the GOP win the majority, and he did. Taft died before McCarthy's Red Scare ended, and McCarthy is now part of Taft's legacy. Some Republicans did speak out against McCarthy, notably Maine's Margaret Chase Smith. She was among the first to push back. Her legacy is one of bipartisan service to the nation. Her reward? At the time of her retirement, she was the longest-serving woman in Senate history. She's also the first woman to ever have her name placed in nomination for the presidency. Now compare that to today's Republican leadership on the Hill. Mitch McConnell and House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, no relation, both made the same calculation that Taft did. Trump will help us win elections, impact on the nation, and on our party be damned. Rich?
Was there remorse on Republicans that they let McCarthy basically hijack the party and as a consequence, bring a stain to him, and it was too late once they let him get too far out of the bottle?
There was, although much of that was immediate political regret because McCarthy's screed played badly and put the Republicans in a bad light. It became more clear as time went on, and within 5 to 10 years of the end of McCarthy, McCarthy was a negative word. McCarthyism was a negative era in our history.
But it was amazing the parallels in that innuendo, smear, no facts, attacking both our foreign service, then he went to even the military, but even to the electeds, to the media, to everything else, never proven.
And the fear he instilled in others. A lot of Republicans, a lot of lawmakers didn't want to push back on McCarthy because they were afraid he was going to turn around and label them as communists. And all of a sudden they would have to defend themselves. The analogy there is Trump beating down Bob Corker and Jeff Flake to serve as an example for other Republicans. Hey, don't complain about me or this will happen to you.
I do see, whatever it's worth, the Mitt Romneys of the world saying, I'm more popular in my state than the president is. Maybe he's the anomaly. But there are no Edward R. Murrows, not because there's not journalists willing to speak out. You saw the piece. But there were only 3 channels back then. And the hold that Murrow had, and when he finally said what he said, it changed this dialogue. Unfortunately, now it's fake news. If you don't happen to listen to that particular brand or whatever else, it's harder to have that control.
Murrow was important. Welsh at the Army hearing was critical. And if we get a similar scene like that, it could be another turning point today.
Fascinating look back, Andrew. Thank you very much. Now, up next, major developments on the Ukraine pressure scandal that has Democrats banging even louder for impeachment. The White House blocking a key witness from Congress, now even saying they shouldn't even be able to proceed with the impeachment proceedings. What the president knew about Ukraine and when he knew it, next. And this note, tomorrow night on RFL, we open up our phone lines to you at home. Trump in crisis, Ukraine, Syria, impeachment, and more. We want to hear from you tomorrow. We're back right after this.